Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the Caar Annual Development Economic Summit. We are so pleased you could join us today. This session will be recorded and made available to members early next week. Please take this opportunity to place cell phones and electronic devices on silent or vibrate to avoid interruption. We would appreciate it. To begin today's event, please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we will be moving on to the approval of the minutes from our June general membership meeting. The minutes were included inside the program you received when you signed in today. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, they stand approved as distributed. Thank you. As you can imagine, a lot of hard work, dedication, and preparation goes into a major event like this one. As part of the Professional Development Master Group, I would like to have the volunteers that worked on the Summit project team, which are shown on the screen, to stand and be recognized. Please join me in a round of applause. Please stand. We recognize this event would not be possible without the generous support of our affiliate sponsors. I would like to recognize today's sponsors, which include food and beverage sponsor, Atlantic Builders, and event sponsors are Guaranteed Rate, Stony Point Design Build, and Wells Fargo Home Mortgage. Please join me in a round of applause. And thank you to those generous affiliates. If you haven't already visited the sponsor tables in the pre-function area, please do so during the reception. Before we get started with the program, we wanted to acknowledge the new facility we are occupying today. The Caar Building Renovation Project has been in production for 4 years. A significant amount of time, attention to detail, and energy went into this renovation from members and community partners. This center serves as both a component to support our members' success as well as provide a special event facility with a modern professional environment. The 3,500 square feet of column-free space is designed to accommodate up to 188 people for business seminars, small group meetings, receptions, and more. Meeting rooms are equipped with the state-of-the-art Creston AV systems for one-button simplicity. Let's take a step back and watch the transformation of the Hillsdale Conference Center right before our eyes. transformation. Now let's watch the Hillsdale Conference Center terrace transformation. These videos really provide you a great perspective of where we started and where we are today. Although not everyone was able to attend today's event, I would like to have the volunteers that worked on a building renovation project team, which are shown on the screen, to stand and be recognized. These individuals dedicated time and energy to make decisions to determine the highest and best use of the Hillsdale Conference Center, and it certainly shows. Please join me in a round of applause as a thank you for the volunteers. Sorry. Now I would like to recognize an extraordinary woman who has been eating, sleeping, and breathing the Caar building renovation project for the past 4 years. Ginger Slavic. Ginger has been instrumental to us through the renovation process. She led several project teams as well as assisted with keeping us on budget and on time when achieving minor and major renovation milestones. Please join me again in a round of thank you for her confirmation. As many of you know, in addition to Caar utilizing the Hillsdale Conference Center for meetings, classes, and events, This facility will be available to rent by the community partners and public. Therefore, Caar will also hold a Hillsdale Conference Center Community Open House on Wednesday, October 2nd from 2 to 5. This event will be promoted through the Charlottesville Chamber of Commerce, Caar's social media channels, and other avenues. We hope you will spread the word of this public event to your friends and business associates, and please, if you can, join us also. Last month, the Caar Board of Directors announced Abby Tamman as our new Chief Executive Officer. Abby, who has over 20 years of association management experience, served as Caar's Senior Director of Programs and MLS operations for the last 5 years. She had been serving as interim CEO since the early summer. Abby, please stand to be recognized. We have full confidence that your positive attitude and exceptional leadership skills will enhance our association both internally and externally. And I know that just by the few times we worked together. Thank you, Abby. I would like to have the volunteers that worked CEO Search Committee, which are shown on the screen, to stand and be recognized. They did a terrific job, and I had a great chairperson. Please stand. These individuals worked diligently with our state association and completed an extensive search to determine the best fit candidate. And as Keith Smith said after the interviews, she knocked it out of the park. She did. Please join me in another round of applause, thanking them for their hard work. We have one more association announcement. Sandy Huffman, Caar office manager, will be retiring at the end of this month. I know we're gonna miss you. Oh God. Sandy first started with the Caar Real Estate Weekly in 2007 and served Caar in various roles since that time. Her smiling face is always great. Sandy, we will truly miss your warm smile, welcoming voice, and cheery demeanor in the Caar office. Please join me again in a round of applause, and thank you, Sandy, for your happy retirement.
It's been a joy, I tell you. I'm just going to miss everybody very much, but I'm not that far away, just in Waynesboro, so I can slip over when you have special events, and I'll lend a...
Or if someone's sick and you need to come in.
Yeah, I can do that. Thank y'all.
Now I would like to invite Virginia Realtors Board of Directors member Denise Ramey to the stage. She will recognize the 2018 Virginia Realtors Honor Society recipients. Thank you, Tilly.
And before I do that, one person was left off of our CEO search committee slide. So if Rachel Burns is here, we also want to thank Rachel. Where's Rachel? So it was fun working with the group, and definitely a first for me. So for those of you who have gone before us in the CEO search process, thank you for the hard work and the time. The Virginia Realtors Honor Society rewards and encourages participation in leadership, educational activities at the local, state, and national realtor organizations. Each honoree will be announced and receive a certificate. As recipients' names are called in alphabetical order, please join us on stage from the right. Sorry, Teely. They're right? You're right. Thank you. Listen to Teely, she's your president. And make your way to the left for a group photo. As for the audience, we ask that you hold your applause until all recipients have received their certificates and assemble to the left of the podium. I would like to recognize the following realtors for inclusion in the Virginia Realtors Honor Society. Kim Armstrong, Reeves Bailey, Sasha Farmer, accepting on Sasha's behalf, Teely, Jennifer, congratulations. Kathy Markwood, Donna Patton, Pat Surrey, our 2018 Realtor of the Year for the Virginia Realtors. Woo! The inestimable Pat Whittam. Congratulations. She's probably going to correct my grammar later that I said something incorrectly. Was that the correct use of the word, Pat? And finally, last but not least, our immediate past president, Arlene Yobbs. So please join me in congratulating all of these fine realtors who are great representatives of Caar and the Virginia Realtors on their inclusion in the Virginia Realtors Honor Society for 2018. And after the photo, I'll turn the meeting back over to Teely. Thank you all. Thank you, Denise. For those of you who may not know, Denise has been elected for Virginia Realtors 2020 leadership team. We thank her for representing Caar and wish her continued success as she continues to advocate for home ownership around the state and throughout the country. We would also like to share an early congratulations to Rachel Burns and S. Lisa Herndon, who will be graduating from the Virginia Leadership Academy. So we'll see you next week up on the stage there. We hope many of you will show your support for these outstanding members at the Momentum 2019, the Virginia Realtors Annual Convention in Williamsburg next week. Today's Development and Economic Summit theme is Being in the Know as We Grow. We hope you will take away invaluable information and connections from today's event, which will help you and your clients make informed real estate decisions for the future. I am pleased to present our three panelists participating in the Future of Tomorrow's Economy panel discussion and invite them to join me on stage as I introduce them. Moderator
Reeves Bailey of Montague Miller and Company, Danushka Nanayakara Skillington, Assistant Vice President for Forecasting and Analysis at the National Association of Home Builders, and Dr. Lisa Sturdivant, Chief Economist of the Virginia Realtors. Unfortunately, Landon Whaley had a family emergency and is not available to join us. If you would like to know more about these panelists, please refer to the program you received when you signed in. Reeves, I will now turn the event over to you.
Thank you, Teely. And welcome to everybody. I'm glad to have the turnout that we do today. I think this will be a really informative program for you all. We will have an opportunity for questions and answers after our two speakers do speak, but what I would ask is that you write down and hold your questions until after they've both spoken, and I'll come running around with the microphone doing my best Phil Donahue or some other impersonation. So we'll have about 12 or 14 minutes or so for each person. So since we have one less person to speak, you each have a little bit more time than we had told you had before. So without further ado, I'd like to start and have Danushka come up and present from the builder's perspective.
Good afternoon. Okay. Chair. Yeah. Yep, this is the one. Hi, so I'm going to talk today a little bit about the macroeconomy, give you an idea about the demand side, supply side, what the builders are facing, and then wrap up with the forecast that we put together. First up, GDP. We can see that before the recession happened, the long-term average in the US between 1958 to 2007 was 3.4%. Then the Great Recession happened, and the GDP growth did not come up to the low 3% that we've seen before. 2018 was an exception. The year ended at 2.9% mainly because of the tax-related growth. And you can see 2019, we think that the year is going to end around 2.3%. And you can see the slowdown that we anticipate for 2020 and 2021. This is mainly because we see a slowdown in consumption and slowdown in business investment. When the GDP growth comes to close to 1%, we're going to call it a growth recession, where the job creation is going to slow down and unemployment rate is actually going to go up too. So this is what we forecast for the whole economy in the next couple of years. At the same time, the economy is a business cycle. We have to keep in mind that we are right now in the longest expansion in history. We are at 124 months, so the slowdown is kind of expected too. Employment, this is the biggest macro indicator. We have a very healthy labor market right now, so across the country, we have gone back to 100% full employment as of 2016. So you can see this is the data for Virginia and Charlottesville area. Both areas have also gone back to 100% employment. What that means is we are at a tight labor market. There are more open jobs than the available amount of workers to actually fill them. So if you are an employee looking for jobs, you can find relatively easy to find a job. But if you are an employer, it is relatively difficult to find these jobs. The unemployment rate also, as of last month, was at 3.7%. This is what we see on the monetary policy side. This is what we expect the Fed to be. Just to give you context, 2018, there were 4 rate hikes. So currently, in July, the Fed actually cut the rate. So the top rate was at 2.25%. And we anticipate there's going to be one more rate cut next week and a possible another one in October as well. So more dovish stance compared to last year. And we Right now, we are pretty confident with the 2 rate cuts in the next 6 months. There could be a possible third one in the first quarter of 2020 as well. Housing demand and affordability. That kind of gives you an idea about what's going on across the country, right? Yeah? Okay. Housing demand and affordability. This is what's going on in the households. This is the debt as a share of income. Just before the recession, you can see where the mortgage debt was and where the consumer debt was. So since the recession, we have seen that the mortgage debt as a share of income has continued to go down. One reason is the fact that home ownership rate is lower. On the other hand, consumer debt has started to increase. And I bet you can't tell why. This is the reason. Student loans and auto loans mainly has been pushing up the consumer debt. Student loans are up 143 points. Auto loans are up 58 points. Auto loans, it is mainly the 5 to 6 years, no money down car loans, right? Student loans. Right now, at the end of 2018, there's $1.5 trillion in student loans people are holding. So this is actually keeping the young people, the millennials, back. They don't have money for down payments, and the home ownership rate is lower because of these types of debt. And one word of caution is the fact that if you default on these type of loans, it is hard to qualify for a mortgage there. Household formation, this is essentially the underlying demand for houses and apartments. You can see that since 2017, the owner-occupied market has been picking up, which is good news. And the opposite is happening in the rent-occupied market. Home ownership rate currently is at 64.2. You can see that the peak was in 2004 at 69.4. So given the demographics and what we are facing right now, we do not think that home ownership is going to be around 69 points. We think the new equilibrium rate is going to be around 64 to 65%. Existing house prices across the country has recovered. This is mainly because of the low inventory. That has pushed up the prices. It's a very classic demand-supply situation right now. And you can see in Charlottesville too, that the existing house prices has recovered. So that kind of gives you an idea about the demand side, what's going on, and then the macro. So let me just talk a little bit about what the builders are facing on the supply side. The biggest issue in construction is labor. The JOLTS numbers that I put up was for June, but yesterday it came up. There are 374,000 job opens in construction right now. That includes residential and non-residential. That means that the builders have projects that they're hiring for, but they're finding it really difficult to bring in labor. Few reasons are the fact that the Great Recession was just devastating. Many just left the labor force for good. And there's an aging labor force right now. Young people are not interested in going into trade schools. And women in construction is only at 9% when women make up almost half the labor force too. And also the immigration crackdown has also choked off new labor supply. So because of these issues, labor is the biggest issue on the construction side. Inputs to residential construction. So this is an index that calculates all the building material prices. This is up 9% since 2017. And the tariffs on aluminum and steel has also contributed to the rise in the price. So what this means is it is more difficult, more costly actually to build a home right now. There's a low lot supply going on. Builders are saying that, there's still a low lot supply going on. Before the recession, it made sense because there was a lot of activity going on. They're still saying there's low lot supply. And at the same time, the median lot size is going down while the median lot value is increasing. So we need more efficient zoning rules. We need to bring more land into the system to help these builders actually acquire lots. Regulatory cost. So the regulatory cost as a share of a single family home is 24.3%. That is almost 10% is during construction and 15% during development. Same things for a multi-family development. an average is 32% of the multifamily development cost is because of regulation fees. And you can see the upper quartile is high as almost 43%. So this is, so that kind of wraps up the supply side. And I'm going to talk about what we see for the forecast. This is the housing market index. This is what we put together. This gauges the builder sentiment in the single family side. It is currently at 66, so above 50 means it's positive. Builders are optimistic given the broader economic conditions, the demand, and the demographic changes. But you can see that the single family starts are actually just in the mid 800s right now. Given that, this is the single family starts forecast that we estimate. So during the recession, single family starts fell 80%. Currently, we are thinking that this year is going to end at around 855,000. And the next couple of years, you can see that the growth rates are around 2 to 3%. This is mainly because of the supply side issues. We do not anticipate single family to get to 1 million. This is one of the reasons, the permits growth. This is just the 12-month growth rate in this area. So when I did the map, just to look at the data for last month, only 7 states out of the whole country had positive growth rates in permits. So permits are a forward-looking indicator, and you can see other than Charlottesville, all the surrounding areas actually had negative growth rates in permits. This is the counterpart to the HMI. This is the multifamily side. This is the multifamily production index. It is at 56 right now. So this also measures the sentiment in the builders who are doing apartments and condos. So they're also optimistic. You can see, unlike single family, multifamily actually has recovered already. During the recession, it fell 76%. 2015 was a peak for multifamily developments. It ended at 394,000 units. That's why you see the very flat growth rates for the next few years, because it's normal. They have already peaked, and we think the unoccupied market is going to pick up. So people are going to be not renting for longer, hopefully, if they can afford to move into their own home. Residential remodeling, 2017 was a strong year. No surprise, because that year existing home sales actually peaked too. So remodeling usually takes right before or after a sale. And given the economic conditions, that's why we are forecasting low growth rates for the next couple of years. But what could boost residential remodeling is the percentage of people, older people, who are actually hoping to retire and staying, aging in place. If we see that happening more and more, this could get boosted. And also, almost half the homes that the housing stock, they're like 50, like almost 50 years old. So we are going to see more efficiency, hopefully new appliances, new remodeling taking place if people are actually staying in their homes longer. But I feel like I gave you a lot of kind of bad news, right? Yeah, but I do want to end with the long-term outlook. It is population. Population is the primary driver in the homes and in apartments. So forget everything here, right? The greatest generation, silent baby boomers, Gen Xers. Look at the yellow bar. They are the millennials. They are the largest living generation in the country right now, 27%. They are the group of people born between 1981 to 1997. So they are going to come through the home buying years. So home buying years are between 25 to 45 years old. The largest cohort just turned 30. So we are going to see a huge pent-up demand. The builders need to be ready for this. They are going to get married. They're going to have children. They want to have their own homes. So we do anticipate the next 5 years or so, they're going to have a huge pent-up demand coming through. So demand side is looking strong. And I want to end with this. This is good news for this area. You can see that the Charlottesville area is actually growing faster than the state and the national rates. So, all right.
Thank you, Danushka. And next we'll have Lisa give her presentation.
Thank you so much for, can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. Thanks for the chance to come and talk. I'm gonna pick up a little bit on a lot of this data that we heard about the national economy, about what's going on the demand side and the supply side, and bring it a little bit closer to home here in Charlottesville, picking up on some of the Charlottesville data that was presented, and then really zero in on the issue of housing affordability. So that's the primary sort of focus of my remarks, but I'm really interested in a lot of the data that were presented, and I hope we have a chance to talk more about some of those supply and demand factors. But one of the things that that I really think is valuable and that I really hope that, that I can share with you is thinking about the kinds of data that affects you here in Charlottesville, here in Virginia, particularly when we hear a lot of national news about economic conditions. And so the idea is to think about how those national and international trends affect us here, and how Virginia and Charlottesville, how the economy here may be different or may be the same, and what that means for the local market. So I'm going to present some data as well. I'm just going to show a little bit of information about job growth in Virginia. And so mirroring some of the data that we saw earlier, job growth was really strong in 2015, 2016 in Virginia. And the pace of job growth has slowed a little bit in 2016, 2017, 2018. About 31,000 jobs were added in July, and the average has been about 45 to 50,000. The reason why I always start with jobs is because job growth is the primary driver of the demand for housing. And so without jobs, without new people coming to take those jobs, it's really hard to have a strong demand for housing, have a strong housing market. So job growth in the state has been relatively strong. The second thing that I always look at too, though, is not all jobs are created equal, right? So if you're gaining a lot of jobs, let's say in the leisure and hospitality sector, let's say you can see that the Virginia gained 12,900 jobs in the leisure and hospitality sector. So this is a really important sector of the Virginia economy. What our motto is, Virginia is for lovers, right? This is the sort of people coming to Virginia because it's a beautiful place to visit. Retail jobs, restaurant jobs, hotel jobs, these are really important to the economy. They don't have wages that are relatively high. So these tend to be jobs that have relatively low wages. That's not to say they're not important to the economy, but that just means that there's a different sort of patterns of housing demand associated with growth in that sector. The largest sector in the state is healthcare and social assistance. That is the fastest growing sector nationally, as well as Virginia. Professional and technical services, that includes a lot of your sort of professional white collar jobs, computer programmers, analysts, lawyers, accountants, things like that. So you can see that there's pretty diverse job growth in Virginia. Retail trade has been down forever, so it continues sort of that bricks and mortar retail stores are sort of shrinking their employment base. Local government was down in July. It's July compared to July, so it's not like that. I'm not exactly sure what that is, so don't worry about that. Hasn't been going on a lot. But you know, there are 22 states, for example, in the nation where manufacturing jobs have fallen, but not here in Virginia. So there's a lot of positive signs here for the state's economy overall. This is Charlottesville, similar, different scale, similar pattern though, very strong job growth in 2015, 2016, slightly slower in more recent years. But one thing that's really interesting is this pie chart shows the mix of jobs in the region. And again, sort of this mix ends up being really important. What do you think that state government stuff is? That's UVA. So just so you know, the university is not in education, it's in state government, so there's a big chunk of UVAs in there. Professional and business services, education and health services, leisure and hospitality, retail trade, those are the biggest sectors here in the region. And it's a pretty robust economy, meaning it's like pretty diverse. There's people from all sorts of different industries. But the thing that I'm really interested in is as housing affordability becomes more of a challenge for the millennials, for the people that the region is trying to attract to jobs, what happens to the ability of the region to be able to continue to attract these jobs here? UVA is not going anywhere, right? So there'll always be really important sectors here in the region. But in terms of thinking about the future growth of the region and how that ties to the housing market, I think more and more people are thinking about that and thinking about what it means to encourage more housing as an economic development strategy as opposed to just a building strategy. And one thing that really speaks to that, I think, is that the Charlottesville area unemployment rate is significantly lower than the US unemployment rate and even lower than the employment rate in the state. When you have an unemployment rate under 3%, it's basically zero. What it means is that it suggests to me anyway that businesses might expand the number of jobs they had or come and open up new shops, but they don't think they can find anyone to work in them when they see that rate so low. So this says to me that there is the potential for there to be greater economic activity in the Charlottesville area if there were more people here who could fill those jobs. And one of the obstacles has been the rising cost of housing. So you can see in the orange bars, you have the median sales price from 2015 to 2019. You can see that sort of steady increase, no declines at all. $316,000 was the median sales price in the Caar region in the second quarter of this year. At the same time, you can see what's happened with rents, right? So the light blue bars are rents for 1 bedroom. The dark blue bars are rents for 2 bedrooms. So in 2019, it's $1,325 to rent a typical 2-bedroom apartment. That's not the new stuff coming on. That's not the brand new shiny building that just came on. That's the average for everything. The 50-year-old building and the brand new building. And that has gone up steadily over the last few years. So what does that mean? This is total rule of thumb, sort of like back of the envelope calculation, but in order to afford the typical home in the Charlottesville area, you need to earn $85,000. So it's sort of using BHDA's numbers to relate income to home price, that's sort of a ballpark. When you go on and look at what's listed, 29% of homes listed for sale are under $316,000. And so the idea of a mismatch between the what folks can afford and what's available for sale, given the extremely low inventories in the region, is only exacerbating over the last few years. On the rental side, using again a rule of thumb, you need about $53,000 in household income to afford the typical 2-bedroom apartment. You go online and look for those, and less than a quarter of apartments rent for that level. Part of it has been, even though Charlottesville has been issuing permits at a faster rate than other parts of Virginia, the pace of construction has increased. So this is new construction trends in the Charlottesville area. Orange is single family, blue is duplex and multifamily. You can see it's really picked up, but it still hasn't picked up sufficiently to meet the demand that has been here in the region. So just to put this in a little bit of perspective. So these are actual wages for different people working in different jobs here in the Charlottesville area. Okay, so the red line is the income I mentioned you needed to afford the typical home, $83,000. The orange line is the income you need to afford the typical 2-bedroom apartment. Someone working for local government, someone working in the construction sector, or working at a credit union, working for one of the area's museums, working in important jobs related to child and youth services, working in the restaurants. This is just an example of the different types of jobs and the wages that they pay here in the Charlottesville area and where you fall in this ability to find housing that you can afford. So why, so why should we care? I mean, I don't mean to make it sound sort of that flip, but I think we do in this room really care about people being able to access housing and access home ownership in particular, but also access housing that they can afford more broadly. We know from research that access to stable and affordable housing has a really important impact on education for children, on health of families and children, and on financial self-sufficiency of families. If you live in a house that's unaffordable and your family is moving every year and you're changing schools every year, there is no way that you're going to do well in school. But you know what else is interesting? If you are in a very well-off family, a very strong middle-class family, and you personally aren't moving, but you have kids in your class that are cycling in, it affects the whole school. It's an impact on the families themselves that are moving, but it also affects our broader communities. As I mentioned, the ability to attract and train workers depends critically on housing affordability and availability. And we care about it on the homeownership side, but also on the rental side. If you are paying more than 30% or 40% of your income every month on rent, how are you possibly putting something away to save for a down payment? Because as you say, there's this huge millennial population, and between student debt and the inability to find affordable rental housing, there's challenges with being able to save up for that down payment. A lack of more moderately priced homes makes it harder to become a homeowner. And on that note, what we found, both on the student debt issue and about how that impacts the ability to access homeownership and about homeownership more generally, is that as we're looking at who's able to get into a home, people of color and lower income folks are less likely to get into homeownership now than they were before. And what we're seeing is this reduced access to homeownership really exacerbating the wealth divide that we've been seeing over the last few years. So there's a recent, I'll end with this, there's a recent Federal Reserve study that shows that student debt is responsible for about 20% of the decline we've seen in homeownership rates among young people, but the rate at which student debt affects homeownership for people of color is 3 times as high. So the fact that student debt is disproportionately affecting people of color means that this gap that we've seen in access to wealth is only increasing in this time where student debt is a critical issue for many, many people. So I'm going to stop there. I look forward to our conversation and to talking about more data and do appreciate the chance. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lisa. That is a lot of information from 2 people who, and it's very detailed and a lot to absorb. But there are probably some of you who have questions. So I'm going to come running around with the microphone if you have questions. So just raise your hand and I'll come out and grab you. So let's see. All right. I'm running over so we can hear them. Hopefully this is on. Is the mic on?
Thank you. Student debt, possible changes in federal law to curtail or help people have forbearance. What is your opinion if either the Democrat gets elected in the Democrat Congress or Trump stays in? What is the possibility that we'll have reform and some forbearance?
I couldn't understand the question. I'm really sorry. I heard about the different political part, but I didn't understand the last part of the question.
What would you say in the next year or two, any change in forbearance for the massive amount of student debt that people have that they can't pay back? How might it come about, and how much could be forgiven?
Yeah. Do you have any comment on the student debt issue if there's a forbearance of student debt?
So I know that Trump was talking about probably privatizing some of the student loans, the student loan debt, which can be pretty detrimental because that means then if Sallie Mae or some private company actually takes over the interest rate, they'll not honor the lower interest rates, right? So their monthly payment is going to go up. And that means that affordability is going to be another. Like a big obstacle for majority of the student loans are federal loans. So, and then they are pretty relentless going after making sure that they get their money, right? I know that the federal loans have a loan forgiveness program. I know that, they're trying to cut back on types like that. But the Democrats are also proposing something 180, forgiving all these loans too. So I'm not really sure how feasible that is. It seems very far-fetched, in my opinion, because somebody at the end of the day has to pay for these loans. So I think honestly, we need to find something in the middle ground. Look at people, how much money they're actually making, their income. What can they afford to pay? Maybe come to an agreement, right? I know a lot of students took, the problem here is not the students who graduated, but the ones who dropped out. So the idea is that when you have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, your lifetime earnings have gone up. So, but almost 1/3 of these students who enroll in college have already dropped out. So now they are saddled with the student loans, but now they have no lifetime earnings to show for it either. So what do you do for these group of people? So this is a question, And I think this is going to be an ongoing question, so how we're going to fix this issue.
And the only thing I'll add, I agree with you. I think it's really unlikely that if the Democrats win, that we're gonna wipe all student debt off the table. And a middle ground is really what's important. In case you don't know, and this was news to me, the state of Virginia, Commonwealth here in Virginia, has a student loan advocate that they hired and has started working in July, whose whole job is for someone with student loan debt to call them and figure out what their options are, because there are options for deferments and forbearance. And I feel like more and more states are making options for people. So if you're advising potential buyers who are like, well, I have all this student debt, make sure they know about that resource. It's not going to solve all the problems, but it might be a valuable resource for potential home buyers.
I heard this in passing on a radio, so I don't have the statistics, but it said that in the state of Virginia, that by the year maybe 2025,
Okay.
there was a very small percentage of people who were going to be living in rural areas, that they were all going to gravitate to Northern Virginia and Richmond, and it was really going to shift. And do you have any info on that?
I don't. I'm fascinated by that. That's so. Two things. I think that there is a sense that Northern Virginia is sort of continuing to attract and concentrate a lot of economic activity. I mean, that's been true for a long time, but with Amazon locating there, that feels like there's something going on there. On the rural issue, though, I think that I'm a little optimistic about rural Virginia. I think there's efforts on the part of the governor's office to do expansions of broadband into more rural areas of the state, which will make, in fact, the Virginia Realtors, we're working with the Office of the Governor to see if we can measure the impact on property values and home prices if broadband is introduced into these markets. Oh, good, awesome. And then, but because I think that, I think there is, maybe it's because I've lived in Northern Virginia for 26 years, but I think there's a little bit of a backlash, a quality of life backlash going on in some of our urban areas. And so I don't have any data either. But my sense is that places like Charlottesville, Roanoke, places like even down in Danville, I think there's a potential for a renaissance for some of these kinds of places as people become more frustrated by traffic and congestion. Again, I have no data on any of that.
So speaking of that, we actually unveiled a new index. It's called the Home Geography, like a building index.
Good, yeah.
So what we did was we took all the permit data at the county level and aggregated at different cuts. So we first launched it in May. So we just relaunched it in a couple of weeks ago. Funny thing, only rural areas actually had growth.
That's really interesting.
Yes. So that was the only area where we actually seeing single family development of taking place. There must be some truth to that. Yeah.
I actually have two questions. One, in terms of UVA being one of the largest employers of our area, do you think, and this is just in general, that UVA has a larger responsibility to our area to ensure housing affordability for their employees or the larger environment?
I love that question.
Thanks.
I think the short answer is yes, in my opinion. I think UVA has a self-interest to become more involved. I know that, for example, at George Mason, they were having difficulty recruiting assistant professors and staff. And so what George Mason and Fairfax said, well, we have this land, let's build some housing to help meet that need. And I can't imagine UVA couldn't see their own self-interest in doing that kind of work. Again, my opinion, no UVA.
Thank you. And to follow up with that question, in terms of the builder's perspective, is there any specific zoning policy that you would like to share or that you feel the city of Charlottesville should be considering in order to address the affordability aspect? Because we're right now in a housing crisis in the city.
I don't have it for Charlottesville, but I know at the national level, bringing in more land to the system is one of our advocacy issues, but I'm not sure exactly what's happening at the local level because the local HBAs, like the home building associations, are the ones who are doing the advocacy work for that. But you can feel free to send me an email and I will get back to you on that.
Well, and just to touch on that too, I think it's based on the data that you shared. I mean, I think it's really clear when you talk about bringing land into the system, what you're really talking about is increasing density, right? Is increasing the amount of housing units that can be built on any given parcel of land, right? And so whether that means allowing more multi-unit buildings in places where it hasn't been thought to be appropriate, or whether it means allowing duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes in single family neighborhoods when that allowing accessory units. So I think the idea of looking at the regulations that inhibit housing choice, which is really what we're talking about. It's about amounts, but it's also in a lot of ways about the diversity of choice. And so that's increasing density, streamlining, approval processes, giving breaks on property taxes when affordable units are included as part of, I mean, there's a whole toolbox of things that I know the city is aware of and is taking into account. But it seems to me that in the work that I've done on this, that there's two things. You need to look at land use and zoning, and then you need to look at whether there are local financial resources that can come into play to help offset the gap in financing housing at market versus at below market.
I'm curious, Lisa, if you've compared the cost, the regulatory cost to build a home in Charlottesville compared to the rest of the state.
No, did you guys do any of that regulation stuff at the state level, or did you just
No,
do it at the national level?
No, I really want to do that. I think that'd be, and I think it will vary pretty significantly from place to place in the state. I know that in our region, in the Washington area, they did a comparison, and in Montgomery County, Maryland, it was like $38,000 a unit was impact fees, for example, and in Fairfax, it was something like $22,000. There was some difference that they had picked up, but I think that's important for us to understand. Now, I will argue not all regulation is bad, and I don't think anyone would say that all regulation needs to go away. We want to protect our environment. We want to do all these things. But I think until we know what the real numbers are and what the real impact is on affordability, I think it kind of leaves us in the dark a little bit. It's like a non-answer. So no, we haven't done that.
A couple of other questions for Danushka. What do you see in terms of the labor shortage going forward? Do you see some solutions to that, or some improvements to that? And then secondly, what are some parts of the country that are particularly weak or particularly strong?
So labor shortage, the issues, behind the labor shortage are long-term issues. So we are going to see this labor shortage continue for the next few years. And I think at the local level, the builder associations, and they need to go to the schools, encourage students to actively go into trade schools. Like, there's such a stigma behind being in construction. So give them internships, apprenticeships. These are like one of the things that we actually encourage. So as long as there's an aging labor force, and then we have no new labor coming in, this is an issue that's going to be there for a while. This won't come as a surprise. Midwest, because of agriculture and manufacturing, mainly because of the trade issues, we are seeing decline across the region. Northeast, because of the tax reform. Now, New Jersey is like the worst off state to own a home because of the new tax law. West, growing, booming, employment, home construction is doing well, and the South too. So those are the two regions we see. GDP, employment, everything is growing in the South and the West, but the Midwest and the Northeast are actually lagging behind in all the sectors.
I heard you mention earlier with the student loans, and that it's about a third of the students that are did you say roughly a third of the students that drop out are affected by that? How much of that millennial population, being the largest segment right now, are actually affected by student loans across the country, to kind of get an idea of which portion is being affected within that greater population?
Well, let me tell you this though. Right now, 22% of the millennials are actually living at home with their parents. So they're like out of school, right? So if you have kids in your basement, they're going to be there permanently. I'm just joking. They're not. So it's just the fact that they have graduated. It is a really big concern when you think about it, because 10 years ago it was only 11%. Right now it's kind of double, right? So this is the problem. They should be right now, if the largest cohort within them has turned 30, they're out of school, they should be able to live on their own. So like what Lisa was saying, it's the affordability that's like keeping them with their parents, you know. So I talk to many, many builders and they say, you know, they're seeing more and more multi-generational homes popping up. And that's very common.
Yeah, and the stat, I don't know if this is what you were asking too, but I saw 2/3 of people who went to college now have student debt. So it is the vast majority of millennials have student debt, but not all of them are in that big high part of the debt level. Sorry.
I actually have a follow-up to the student loan question as well, one earlier. The average student loan debt is $30,000. That's where about 80% of the people. The state of Maryland has a program where they pay, your student loan is basically paid off through your mortgage.
Yep.
So that like the first $30,000,
Yep.
if you stay there for 5 years, it's prorated every year. I do know right now the Department of Education is considering how to roll this out in the entire country, that each state could do this program. They're working really aggressively hard on student debt and addressing that issue right now. And the Maryland program seems to be pretty successful and
cool.
self-funding after a few years.
I see.
Is this something that, as advocates for us with NAR and with Caar, that y'all are working to see here in the state of Virginia as well as throughout the country?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know Jessica's here from NAR. We should ask her too. I don't know as much about that program, but since you've asked, I want to look into it and find out more about that, because it seems to solve a couple problems at the same time, doesn't it? So I don't know the answer to that, but I will look into it.
Do we have other questions? Okay, we've got time for one more here.
Charlottesville City Council is doing an experiment with form-based code.
Okay.
It's being done in an area of the city called the SIA, which basically encompasses the south side of downtown. And it's a neighborhood that has readaptive use of former commercial space, manufacturing space actually. And it also has one of the lower income areas and a lot of public housing. And those workshops have been going on for some time, but they did a workshop about a week ago. And for the first time, the consultancy for the form-based code brought in somebody who talked about the economics of it. And I was startled to find that their projections were in the SIA, but similar to the city, that with an average median income of about $72,000, that builders could probably build at 60% of that value. 40% of that value, they probably could do it if they were getting some kind of voucher or subsidy. But at 30%, there's no way it's going to be built. It's got to be totally subsidized. And then I see your chart about where growth is in the leisure and the service industry, which is, I'm quite sure, fairly parallel to that 30%.
Right.
So with all the discussions of affordability,
Right.
I never see it come up of who's going to pay
Yeah,
outside of taxes.
Right.
And
So,
Charlottesville as a city is a very unique place because we have an extremely high number of single family residents in relationship to our commercial. And the commercial is already paying significantly more in taxes than single families are.
Yeah.
So have you seen anything in the state that is addressing this problem or where it
Not
could
at the
go?
state. No, it happens at the local level. But the problem you're raising is not, it's not unique to Charlottesville. As you say, right, you can build to 60%, but the need is down here at 30%. Who's filling that gap? And like I said before, there are basically two ways you can fill it. You can fill it by public money coming in to give low-cost loans or grants or whatever, or you can give it with land. You can fill it with city-owned land, or you can fill it with additional density. There are lots of different ways to fill it, and it doesn't have to come from taxes, from tax increases. It can, for sure, if that's the value that the community comes with, but it is not anything that the state right now seems like they want to get involved in. They want the locals to figure it out. But there's lots of good lessons to learn from places that have done this. We are lucky in this state in that while they don't get everything right, there are things that Fairfax and Arlington, Alexandria, who are a little bit further along on the affordability like craziness, that have learned. And so it makes sense to learn those lessons of what's happened. Not to go off on this, but at the end of the day, we know what the tools are. The challenge is getting the political will and getting community opposition to anything that might involve a change to how business has been done before to kind of come along for the ride. Like there's no magic bullet. We just need to kind of move forward with it in some ways. That's depressing.
So I know that. So I know that there were others of you who had questions, and as we adjourn from this segment of our program today and go and tour the building and have some hors d'oeuvres and everything, then our panelists will be here and we'd be happy to answer questions. I did have one other question though that I've got to pass along from Frank at Southern Development, and he wanted to know if either of you ladies might be in the market for a new home today. So
Yes. Yes, but
So-
just in DC though.
anyway, we sincerely thank you for both being here today, and we can return to our seats. And Teal, I'll turn the program back over to you.
Thank you, Reeves. We haven't broke yet. Okay, before we invite Dr. Jessica Lautz, Vice President of Demographics and Behavioral Insights with the National Association of Realtors, to present the future of real estate, we will have a 20-minute break. And please come back in here in 20 minutes or I'll be out there getting you. We heard you in February last year, right? Weren't you at our... To continue our program, I would like to invite Dr. Jessica Lautz to the stage to present the future of real estate. If you'd like to know more about Jessica, please refer to the program you received when you signed in. I heard her speak at a VR meeting and she's really good, so.
All right, so I'm between you and a reception. So I'm gonna keep that in mind and I'm gonna go through my slides. I have a top 11 list because no one's gonna remember a top 10 list. So I'm just making myself super extra just from the start. All right. So the future of real estate is really easy to predict. You take today's trends and then you just carry them forward. So that's really what I'm gonna be going over. What we're seeing right now is everyone's talking about affordability, right? We talked about it just earlier in the panel presentation. We talked about the lack of supply. These are not changes that we're really seeing right now because we're short a lot of homes in the US housing market by 5 to 6 million homes. So my first point here is just the lack of affordable housing inventory. We've actually seen an unprecedented amount of price growth in the US housing market today. It's actually 90 months on a year-over-year basis. We've been collecting existing home sales in our departments since the 1970s, and this is the longest time period that we've actually seen this type of price growth. So it really is an unprecedented market. In a really healthy market, what we'd want to see is 6 months of housing supply, which means that every home, even the smelly home that you don't want to actually take buyers to, but it's the only home that's available in their price point and it is within their commute time, so you have to go to that home, but you really don't want to, that home sells too, even within a balanced 6 months. Right now, what we see is 4 months supply. And that's across the US. Now there's absolutely pockets where that is much different. I live in the Arlington, Virginia area. And I will say that with Amazon coming in, I think we have about 30 seconds of housing supply. There's really not a lot of housing supply in my zip code right now. Those 6 people who moved in, they're really making a difference there. Right, so we're a little bit ahead. The other thing that we know is that the first-time homebuyer share, and we've been saying this for about a decade, first-time homebuyers are not in the market right now. When we look at primary residence buyers, the estimate is there are primary residence buyers who are buying their home just to live in on a daily basis, 365 days out of the year. They are about 2/3 of the market. And when you cut that down even further, first-time home buyers today, they're about 1/3 of the market. What you want to see, what we have seen historically, is 40% of the market. And why we want that? So that people can move up, so they can move into a different home. But you just don't see those first-time home buyers that rung today. But we have seen pushes, right? We saw that first-time homebuyer tax credit coming out of the recession, and we did see that push at that time period. It actually pushed it all the way up to 50% of the market. But today, it's at historic lows. The other thing that we know is that the buyer today is a little different. And there were some questions about that from the last panel, and I wanted to really address them, and I was excited about the questions that were being asked. Because what we're seeing is that a lot of buyers today, especially first-time home buyers, they're actually moving to the burbs. They're moving to small towns. They're not moving to the city centers that a lot of people are talking about. The city center is hot, right? It's really expensive. Very few people can actually afford it. You get very little space. And most of those places are actually rental properties. A lot of builders are building rental properties today because they see that that's where the profit is. They have all these crazy amenities. You don't have to make your own breakfast because it's waiting for you in the morning when you get to the lobby of essentially your hotel. You don't have to do your own laundry, so you don't need laundry facilities. Drop it off in your bag and it's washed and folded for you by the time you get home from work. A lot of these places are very expensive and they have these really cool amenities. Some of them don't even come with kitchens. You just go to a communal kitchen, and there's actually services now that will actually teach you how to cook, maybe your Hello Fresh that you get like twice a week. No, it's really crazy. These amenities are really beautiful. But when we think about your first-time home buyer who wants to buy a house and live in it for 10 years, is that where they want to buy a house? Probably not. I mean, just thinking about their own expectations of what could happen in 10 years. So we see this huge push because the suburbs and small towns become very affordable for your first-time home buyers. We actually see this rise in millennials, and I love and hate the term millennials because millennials are both a 24-year-old and they're also a 39-year-old. Okay, that's a much different age. So even in our reports, we really break out, we say younger and older millennials, younger and older boomers, because there's just not one fits all for an entire generation of adults. All right, the other thing that we see is that for buyers today, there is this huge push to live closer to friends and family, more so than there has been historically. Our first-time home buyers, when they go to seek their first home and they think about where do I want to live, what's important to me, they actually on the top of their list, sure, it's a great commute, it's someplace that's affordable, it's a good neighborhood, or however they define it, but it's also where's my friends and family. And when we think about the Gen Xer population, we think about the boomer population, as a whole, when they went to look for their first home, that was not top priority. No. And where are their parents? They're in the burbs, they're in small towns. So I might be moving directly from that family member's home, and I'll go over some of that into home ownership right next door. When we look at all of this and we look at these trends, what we know at the end of the day is we're short 5 to 6 million homes. That's a lot of homes. And each municipality is facing differences in why they're short. So Buffalo, New York, for example, they have a housing shortage, which is crazy to think in Buffalo, New York. The reason why they have a housing shortage is because they have vacant properties that really need to be retrofitted. But then you go to some place like Minneapolis and they're trying to address it because they have these huge homes, which I would actually personally say living in Arlington, they're bordering on mansions because they're so big, but they're trying to address it by the older widow unfortunately passed away, and now we're gonna retrofit it into a townhouse, 4 townhouses maybe within that one huge home. So really addressing it in different types of way within different areas. All right, the buyers today, much different type of buyer. The first-time home buyers who are entering the housing market, they're much wealthier than they have been historically. And what we know is that the buyer who can enter, and I'll go over some of this, are more likely to have family help for first-time home buyers, but they're also, just for the repeat buyer, they're more likely to even own a second property than they have in the past. So maybe that's a vacation home or a home that they were underwater in and then they went to purchase another home and they can rent that out. It's a different type of buyer than what we have seen historically. All right, number 2, buyers are swiping left on love. All right, so I'm not on these apps because I'm happily married and it's been 7 years, so I'm not on any of these dating apps. So what I did for this chart or this slide here is my little sister who's 25, she lives in my basement. It's a very great place for her to live. It's so great for all of us involved in that housing situation. But I yelled downstairs and I said, hey, which way are you swiping on that app that you're on? And she was like, left, left. And I was like, okay, got it. And then she started singing some song. I don't really know, and I'm not going to say the lyrics. I think it's literally left, left. Okay, so What we know is that demographics are really a good predictor of who's going to buy homes. Because when we look back at the 1960s, more than 70% of American adults were married, and today it's just half. Yeah. People are either stalling marriage, or they're leaving a marriage and they're not going back to a marriage, or they're just not doing it at all. So there's a lot of that going on right now among adults. And so we hear, well, because that's going on, people are not going to buy homes, especially millennials and first-time homebuyers, because they don't need a place to live if they're single. Okay, well, that's just crazy because you have to live somewhere. So what we do see is that, yeah, they're skipping the ring, but they're buying a house. When we look back at the 1980s, more than 70% of first-time homebuyers were married couples, and today it's just 54%. That's a huge drop. And because that has to add up to 100%, you're gonna see growth other places, right? So you gotta trade in from married couple to single. So when we look at the chart, we can see there's this growth in single females. They're actually 18% of first-time homebuyers today. That's a lot. They're killing it. That's great. They're out there purchasing homes and they don't need that ring on their finger. That's fantastic. The other thing that we're seeing, biggest share that we've seen this year, that we've seen historically, and a rising share, is that purple line. 16% of buyers today are unmarried couples. Yeah, that's a huge rise. So they are coupling up, they're shacking up, but they're not necessarily getting married. Okay, no judgment. I'm conveying the data. Okay. Maybe they're roommates in the home, but I'm going to say that they're not necessarily roommates. No judgment. And the reason why I'm going to say that they're not necessarily roommates, because we go a step further on that, and I'll get there in a second. But the 10% line right there, that one's really interesting too, because we keep talking about single females, and we've been talking about it for a long time, and it's a really cool news article to talk about the single female buyers. We've seen a growth in single male buyers. That's an interesting one to me. So they're out there and they're saying, they had historically said the stock market's a really good financial investment, but now they're actually starting to look, hey, the housing market, that's a good place to actually put my money, because now I have a place to live too, and I'm not actually putting it towards rent. So interesting. Now, this 2% line, I know people get really excited about decimal points. I do. No, but I really do, because we're seeing this growth in that 2%, and it's actually the Golden Girls phenomenon. They don't have a relationship. They're not the unmarried couple. They're just friends, or not frenemies, I guess, living within a house, buying a house together. This is on the rise as well. We actually see it on the rise among renters as well. And so you see this Golden Girls phenomenon really emerging because it's so expensive to buy a house today. Housing affordability really factors in. There's a question in the back already. Uh-oh. Golden Girls phenomenon by gender. Oh, yes. That is a great question, because I think that it is more women doing it, but I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, that is a fantastic question. Yeah. Women do live longer, so you do see that they would go and purchase this home together, or they would rent together at higher rates, absolutely. The other thing that I think is interesting about single females, just as a guess here, is that really top priority for them is actually to purchase a home near friends and family. Very top priority for them as a buyer. So I could very much see that they would go and purchase a home with a friend, because that's just in your house. All right. Okay, the median age of buyers. This is something that I think is another myth that we're hearing a lot about, is that your first-time home buyer is going to be older. All right. Here I am going to say, the blue line on the bottom line right there, that's your age of your first-time home buyer back to 1981. It's not really changing. It's really boring. If I put that line on that chart, you would be like, why are you showing me this? Okay, it's not changing. It bounces between 28 and 32, but the number that was changing was that household income. And I'll show you a couple other numbers that are really changing too for our first-time home buyers. But age, not one of them that's changing. Now, the age that I think that we need to pay more attention to as an industry is the age of your repeat buyer. Back in the 1980s, it's that purple line at the top. The 1980s, your repeat buyer was in their mid-30s. Today, your repeat buyer's in their mid-50s. That's a change. That's a big shift. People are living longer. They're working longer. They're happy to take on a 30-year fixed mortgage at 55 years old. That is a really big change. That's a big shift. And they're planning on living in that home for 15, 20 years, never moving from that home. It's a big change. All right. Number 3, caretaking now needs a lint brush. All right, so we talked about the drop in marriage rates, and I'm not gonna say that marriage leads to the stork, but you can draw your own conclusions there. What I am gonna say is that we have more than a 30-year low in birth rates in the US, okay? So people are not having children as much as they used to. Now, this is not just a US phenomenon, this is also a worldwide phenomenon. So when we actually look at other countries, Japan sells more adult diapers than baby diapers. Okay, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, I know. Okay, so yeah. They don't have a lot of ways to fix for this. So it is an aging society. They don't have immigration, so they're not bringing in a new population. Not largely, they don't have immigration. So what they've actually done is there are implications for not having a young society because unfortunately, who's gonna pay for Social Security or pensions or just flat out care for the old? And so this becomes a really big problem. But what they've also seen recently is that small businesses have had to shutter their doors because they don't have enough employees to actually work in their workforce. So one way that they're trying to address it is not to say just work more hours. They work plenty of hours. In fact, what they've actually done is the opposite effect. They've actually said, no, you have to work less hours, not your 60-hour work week that you want to do as a society. You need to work like 40 hours because you need to go home and you need to have special quality time with the people who are perhaps living in your house, or just the person, not people. Because then maybe in 9 months we'll have a greater society. You guys can connect the dots there. I'm not gonna do it for you, okay. Everyone's an adult in the room, okay. The other thing that we know is that other countries are trying to deal with this in other ways as well. And so we actually see that in Denmark, they actually had an ad campaign called Do It for Denmark. Okay, you guys can imagine what they're doing. So what they actually did with this ad campaign is they said they encouraged 3-day weekends because in 9 months after a 3-day weekend, the stork comes. And they actually said that as a society, what they would do is they would encourage people to take these 3-day weekends. And if the stork does come, they'll pay for your diapers, sweet. And they will also give you a family vacation for 3. Yeah. It's crazy. They're really doing everything because at the end of the day, you have to be able to have people to have a society. Okay. All right. So there's a lot of talk when this comes to housing, right? Because if you don't have kids, maybe you don't need a house. Okay. Again, you're a single adult. You probably do need somewhere to live, not your parents' basement. And what we've seen is that buyers are buying, but they're not necessarily buying with kids in their house. Right. Back to the 1980s to today. Yeah. That's kids under the age of 18 in that house, 58% to 34. Yeah. So just as you guys kind of like think about that for a second, I think it really has some really big implications. If the housing supply that we have is 3 bedrooms, 2 baths in the suburbs, a single family home, do you need that if you're a single adult with no kids? Maybe you want it, okay? No judgment, absolutely. Maybe you want it, you want a party room, you want a closet that's a bedroom, whatever. Okay, you're gonna use it in a different way. But these are some big implications for schools. This is some big implications for where you think it's a priority to buy that house that's a single family house. That's a really big implication for where else you're gonna be spending your money. Maybe it is not the $3,000 per month for one kid in daycare, which is why we see a lot of people stepping away from having kids. Is really just comes down to finances. And instead, you could put all that towards housing. And maybe you get that single family home then. Okay, the other thing that we see is there's a trade-in going on here, and there's a trade-in for 4-legged animals. Straight out, there is. We have been doing a little bit of research on this and tiptoeing into it because there seems to be this precedent that people are willing to get Fitbits essentially for their dog to track their steps and their water consumption and their other movements they have. They're also willing to actually get solar panels for their dog houses. Yeah. Okay. That's an investment you make once, not daycare every month. So, okay, maybe people are doing it. So we have done a lot of research on this. And one report is called Animal House. You can check it out. But essentially, we asked the American public, hey, are you willing to, you know, trade in your house for your pet? Which one comes first? And people overwhelmingly said that they would not give up their pet due to housing. They would just move. That's a big shift. That's a priority shift in HOAs, in condos, in weight limits, and so on and so on. The other thing that we see is that people are retrofitting their homes for their pet. If you have a pet, about half of them are putting in dog doors and fences and so on. And when we look at neighborhood preferences, we actually see that for unmarried couples, whether you have green space and whether you're close to a dog park is more important than schools. Yeah, that growing population of first-time home buyers. That's a huge shift in what we think of as expenses and housing priorities. So these are my 3 fur babies in my house. Actually, the cats are my fur babies. The dog just lives there. So the cats I had, and they are lovely, and they're actually not. At 3 in the morning, they're actually the worst creatures in the entire world because they want to wake me up. But the dog came with a sister. So the sister in the basement, she's 25 years old, and she went through this horrible breakup in January. And she called me and my husband. She's like, can I please move back in with you? And she had lived there since she was 16. And of course, we were like, fine, we can move you out over the weekend. It's going to be amazing. And over the process, she lost her rental apartment. Plug for, wow, that's hard to get out of as an unmarried couple. And she also lost her dog in the process of that breakup. So that was heartbreaking. And then she lost her job because essentially she was going to be a country music song. That's really what she was going for in life. So yeah. So she kept plugging us, and she was like, hey, please, can I get a dog? Can I get a dog? And I said, no, because I'm not home. And my husband was like, absolutely not. I get allergy shots twice a week. Why would I want any additional animal? So finally we said, fine, if you give us a 5-minute PowerPoint pitch, maybe we'll think about it, but please shower first because you stink. So she did. She suited up and she gave us a 5-minute PowerPoint pitch, including what's in it for me, which is apparently adding this to my presentations. And so my husband emailed her the next day with rules, including in a bulleted list. The dog has to be under 35 pounds because when you move out for a rental apartment, which you will move out, the dog goes with you. So she still lives there. It's August, and we have a 55-pound hound dog. It's great. There's dog parks nearby. It's good. Life is good. I am not going to. Yeah, I'm one of those who's not home and I can't afford it. All right, so moving on. Number 4, student loan debt. Everyone asked a lot of questions about this. I can't address every single one of the questions that you asked because frankly, I can't remember them all, but I will go through the really depressing research. Okay, so it's $1.5 trillion in the US economy. It's increased 150% in the last decade overall. A lot of the questions focused on millennials and student debt, but I gotta tell you guys, for those who are over the age of 55, it's actually increased 1,250% in the last decade. Yeah, the dollar amount. Because people went back to school after the recession and they said second career, and they went and got a grad degree because they couldn't get a job, and so on and so on. And so 3/4 of their student debt is actually for them. And they do take on debt then for their kids because then they feel bad and then they're living in their basement and so on, right? Okay, so you see the pattern here that's going on. I'll give you, I think, the most depressing stat, I think, and also one where honestly last week I was speaking at NVAR, and I'm not going to get emotional. Maybe I am. Maybe I'll just start crying on stage. Who knows? Okay, so I was at NVAR last week, and I said this stat, and this woman came up after me, after the presentation to me, and she showed me her cell phone, and she actually pulled up her son's student loan amount and was like, he's in this situation. So I just encourage you, if you have student debt, to look it up right now after I say this. 55% of people who are making on-time payments to their student loan debt owe more next month than they did after their payment this month. It's a negative AM loan for a lot of people because they are paying what they can pay. They're in loans where they're paying the very minimum amount that they can make a payment on. Okay, people are picking up their phones. Okay, so, well, all right, so I would encourage just, checking that out, but I would also say that that has a really big implication to housing. And members started talking to us about this 6, 7 years ago. We were definitely ahead of the curve. We were definitely on the fringe. And I can tell you that my boss was like, what in the world are you doing? You are on the fringe of this research. And I was like, I promise you it's an issue. But then we started hearing it from members because they said, hey, my kid has this, and they're going to be held back from a lot of things. And if my kid has it, and my kid is always the smartest kid in the room because that's what we always think, then that means that every other buyer out there soon will have this issue. And what we've seen is that in doing research on this topic is that yes, it's absolutely 100% an issue. For those who are paying, what we have found, and this research is on millennials, but it's millennials who are currently paying, so it's the really good ones, it's the ones who are making these payments. Their actual student debt is more than their income. Yeah. So it's hard to imagine in that scenario saving for anything, right? It's hard to imagine going on a date. It's hard to imagine buying that new outfit at Old Navy or the Gap or Ann Taylor Loft, wherever you want to get your cool work clothes. It's hard to do that because it's hard to save. And we've asked a laundry list of things, including what would you do if you had the ability to get rid of this debt? And actually the number one on the list is, okay, I'm not going to fault this. The number one on the list is taking a vacation. Number two is actually buying a house. That's the top things that they want to do. And it becomes very hard to think about that when you have this much debt. And it becomes very hard if you're renting too. So what we have found is that 80% of these individuals are not owners, right? Not a huge surprise. And the top reason is because of their debt. They expect that they're going to have a 7-year delay before entering homeownership, before their debt to income ratio is in check, before they can get there. We also wanted to know the lucky ones, the ones who do currently own a house, who have that debt. We did see that about more than a quarter of them are actually in a situation where they can't sell because their credit is damaged or the debt to income ratio or just the affordability crisis has put them in a situation where they can't buy. And they expect to have a 3-year delay. And quite the difference there as well. All right, number 5, bank of mom and dad. Because we know that there are a lot of buyers entering the market, the first-time home buyers, they're wealthier, the same age. They also have a lift up, absolutely. So the joy of having a 25-year-old in my house is not just the coffee cups and the empty chips bags, but it's also that I get to meet all of her lovely friends. And one of them is Kelly, and she's recently engaged. And she actually just bought her first house. But I will tell you, in the process of doing that, she did actually message me on Facebook, and she said, hey, I got a gift for a wedding gift of a down payment assistance, and I want to buy a place in Alexandria. I'm in Fredericksburg right now. How can I do this? Is this going to affect my low down payment program options? And one, I was like, do you have a realtor, Kelly? This is really exciting. Congratulations all the way around. And she said, yeah, I have a realtor. And I was like, well, have you talked to your realtor about this? No, I mean, they don't really know the answer. So that's why I'm reaching out to you. And I was like, okay, well, do you have a mortgage broker? Because your mortgage broker is totally going to answer these questions. They don't really know either. And I was like, oh, wow, Kelly. Okay, well, that kind of stinks. Because I gave her HUD.gov. Like, I don't know the local programs that are available, but there are local programs that are available in so many areas that could help you get into a home on these low down payment programs. So she did eventually get in after she put on about a dozen contracts. She found a house of her own. All right, but she has mom and dad's help. And she is no different than most first-time home buyers out there. Not most, but a third. A third of first-time home buyers have mom and dad's help today financially to get into that house. And if it's not that cash gift, that transfer of money, which maybe they're tapping stocks or equity or just flat out savings, a lot of them are actually doing what my sister says she's doing, but she's not, which is saving by living at home with mom and dad. I mean, I can't even pretend because she's not. So apparently she's going to apply for grad school. So that means she's going to go to grad school, take on more debt, and then still be there. Like, I get where this is going. It's not ending. So, but there are nearly a quarter of your first-time home buyers today are moving directly from a parent's home into home ownership. That is a really big shift, but it also makes every agent and broker job so much harder in that transaction because they've never rented, they've never gone through that search process before, and they're reliant on you guys to fix everything. All right. On the flip side of that, because you're living in someone's house, you're coming from a multi-generational home. What we've seen actually is that this used to be a boomer thing, that multi-generational homes were very popular among boomers as the sandwich generation. But what we've actually seen, the torch has been passed to Gen Xers, where 1 in 6 purchased a multi-generational home last year. For kids over the age of 18, aging parents, all living within that home, and often kids under the age of 18 living in that home as well. So that 55-year-old repeat buyer, very likely in this scenario. Very interesting. All right, number 6, the bar has risen on expectations. Yeah. So if you're buying a home with someone else's money and you're watching a lot of HGTV, okay. All right, so this became a lot of fodder because from our research committee, they basically said HGTV is ruining their lives. And we did some research on this, and what we found is that yes, 65% of members cited a portion of buyers expect homes to look like TV shows. Yeah. 71% of members cited a portion of buyers are disappointed that real homes don't look like TV shows. All the gray paint. All right. 60% of members said that you are working with Kelly, a portion of buyers who consult family for advice as opposed to you. Yeah. All right. So I don't have solutions for any of these things. The only thing I'll say is that we did do this in conjunction with a staging report. I can't fix and I can't cancel HGTV on every channel, though I would like to, right? What we did do is we did a report on home staging, and we said, are you doing it? How many of you are doing it? Has this changed your business model? And what we found is actually about 38% of members said that yes, this whole phenomenon has changed how they're doing business out there right now. And home staging is a portion of it because you can bring in buyers. You can help them visualize that property. You get a better offer for that home in a quicker amount of time, so why not do it? So we do have some information on there, and NAR does provide a whole page on home staging as well. All right, number 7, 10 years longer. And I put these back to back because they are in such conflict with each other. Because what we see is that people are owning homes for a very long period of time, which means that that kitchen that they remodeled in 1994 is the best kitchen that they've ever had, and why would they change it? And that shag carpet is amazing, and they remember when they put it in, so why would you change that? Yes. That's absolutely what's happening right now. And so people used to move every 6 to 7 years, but now when they're moving is 10 years, 9 years. And that's the median, which means that half are above and half are below. But it does mean that people are staying in their homes longer. And it does make it very difficult in that transaction to, one, get them unstuck from that home that they think is worth $1 million, and it's really not. But it also makes it very difficult in that process to get them to think about the remodeling process as well. So we have a whole series of reports on this. If you want to bring it in front of them and just be like, no, you will recoup value on some of these things. Like Kerwood Field, putting in just a couple $100 on seeding and sodding grass is like, I think it's 300% investment return on value there. It's just small dollar things really do bang for the buck. All right. Number 8, iBuyers. Good headline. Are you guys hearing a lot about this? It's hit or miss, right? So in the South, people are talking about it a little more, where homes are more in the suburban areas that are in subdivisions that look more similar to each other. What we are seeing is a lot of news articles about this, a lot of clippings. But we asked the American public in April, have they heard of the term iBuyer? And this is in a phone survey, and so you can get all kinds of households, whether you're a renter or an owner or doubling up with someone. And what we found is only 5% of US households have heard of iBuyers. And then when we defined it and we said, okay, so you own your home, would you sell it if you could sell it in a couple hours as opposed to having to list your home and stage it and do all these things? And what we found overwhelmingly is 8 in 10 would not even consider doing this once defined. Now that 5%, it increases a little bit when you look at specific populations. It's a whopping 6% in the South, yeah. And it also increases for those who are 18 to 24 years old, which I looked at the data and I was like, there is no way that these kids know what an iBuyer is. And so I'm pretty sure they think it's an iPhone app. I don't actually think it's possible. So All right. Number 9, the agent is trusted. Absolutely. There seems to be this fear out there today. The fear of the unknown is always a thing, right? So we don't know millennials, though they're living with us. And we get nervous that their buying preferences are going to be somehow different. We're just not seeing it in the data. And we also get worried that maybe they just won't use an agent and they're going to buy everything online. It's not true when it comes to the biggest financial decision that they're going to make in their life. What we actually see in the data is that younger millennials use agents at the highest rate of any other population. Second highest, older millennials. Third highest, Gen Xers. The younger age groups actually use agents at higher rates. And they're using referrals at the highest rates. Yes, they see what their friend has or what their parents have and they want it. That's absolutely true. What we don't see is that they want to do this online. They're not finding their agent online. We just don't see that moving. At the end of the day, they want someone who is trusted, who has a good reputation and is honest. That's it, and is going to help them through that process. And if we think about that, it makes sense because they had helicopter parents who helped them with their job interview, who in Silicon Valley, there's parental waiting rooms. And now they have snowplow parents where I think Newsweek or it was some news outlet did a survey and they said, actually, how many employers, bosses have been contacted by your employee's parent? And more than 10% actually had. Yeah, yes. Where one story was really interesting. They were really upset on their daughter's behalf because their daughter was spelling things incorrectly. And the parent wanted to be like, no, you should be able to use creative spelling to the boss. That's not a thing. So we really see this very involvement of parents, right? And that means that if they're calling the boss, they're calling you. Okay, we can take that step. They're going through that home tour with you. Yeah, all right. So on the agent use side, what we see for buyers is that 87% of transactions are using a buyer's agent. They want that trusted, that respected person in that transaction. They want the expert there with them. On the selling side, 91% of sellers are using an agent. So one of the young 25-year-olds who comes into my house is Marcia. I'm pretty sure she actually lives there. I'm not entirely sure that she doesn't live there, but I think she does. She's my sister's best friend. It's fine. It's great. But I'm pretty sure she lives in my house. She happens to be a realtor. And because she's a realtor, she also does like 500 other jobs. So she works on campaigns. She's a personal trainer. She's a dog walker. She does have an office job she goes to, I think. It's a 9 to 5. So she has 500 jobs, but she's always there when she's not doing one of them. And she is actually killing it as an agent. She's young. She's a whippersnapper. She's awesome. She's hustling. She's always hustling. She's always leaving her business cards in my house. I'm like, I don't need you to walk my dog. Like, you live here. And I'm not going to, like, why would I sell the house that you're staying in? Like, this is crazy, okay? So I always get her card, which I know that means that because I have 3 of her business cards on my fridge, that means that every other client of hers also has these business cards that she's just throwing out. But what I think is super interesting is that watching her become an agent, watching her study for the exams, one, it becomes very cool and personal because it's in my house. But 2, it becomes really interesting because she's had clients in the last year since she's become an agent. And her first client was actually her personal training, older couple. They wanted to downsize. So that was her first client. And they used her not because she was experienced, because trust me, she was not experienced. She was not. But they used her because she was honest and trustworthy, and they just wanted to go with someone who they actually knew. And that's really what it comes down to in that real estate transaction. On the selling side, what we know is that the top 4 things are not changing, and they haven't changed since I've been doing this research since 2007. You want someone who will sell within that specific time frame because you're always in a time crunch once you go to sell. You want it priced competitively, and you want to find a competitive buyer, and you want to actually, or qualified buyer, and then you want to actually market it competitively. Those 4 things, they don't change. It's the bread and butter of the 200 steps that you're doing in that transaction. All right. So who are our members? Well, I'll say they look a lot like Marcia. They really do. The new members who are coming in, they really do look like a lot like her. And the reason why I say that, since 2001, there's been a 20% increase in female members. It's the highest we've recorded, 63%. We have reports on this going back, like very, very old reports that are very dusty and are very funny to look at. The other thing that we know is that since 2001, 120% increase in minority membership. Yeah. Yeah? Yeah. All right. So we have 1.3 million members, tiptoeing to 1.4 million members. And all y'all are the same, right? Y'all have the same preferences. Y'all want to do the exact same thing in your own niche. No. So we all know that all of you guys are entrepreneurs and you all have your own communication styles and your own preferences. And so we've actually really taken a deep dive recently into predictive analytics. The team is now fully hired as of this last month. We're trying to really target our communications better, but actually target what you guys want the way that you want to see it and hear it. So much the way that Netflix will send you recommendations of, you're gonna like this show because you liked these 10 other shows that you just binged over the weekend and you didn't move from your couch. Yeah, just me? Okay, so we do know that companies are doing this, and so we're trying to do that right now in the research department. And we've started with a couple pilots. We've started with our annual convention. We started with a Realtor magazine, so that maybe not all 1.3 million members are receiving the exact same magazine with the exact same articles, because y'all might want it a little differently. So we're trying to take a dive into those types of projects. All right, number 11, homeownership is a goal. We made it, the last one. Did I already give you 11? Do you have 2 11s in here? I don't know, it's a trick. Okay. We do know that even though there's an overwhelming amount of student debt, we do know that even though there's an unprecedented amount of millennials living at home with their parents, they're also the largest segment of buyers today. They are out there buying if they can get there financially, often with mom and dad's help, but they can get there. What we know is for the non-owners that they want homeownership. They think it's part of their American dream. They want to get there in the future if they can't get there today. That's a lot of touchy-feely. So now I provide you some dollars. Okay, in Virginia, for every home that's sold, you should be incredibly proud of yourself because you are actually adding nearly $95,000 to the state GDP. That's crazy because it's not just that home sale transaction. It's the perfect gray paint. It's the stainless steel appliances. It's getting rid of the shag carpet before you sell. It's the moving truck. It's the closing. It's all of that. So it all adds into really making a difference. So for each 2 homes that are sold, 1 job is created. It's amazing. It's very, very cool work that you guys are doing. Not that I want your job because it's really hard. All right. I will say your call to action, please follow us. I am one of the people in the department. There's a lot of other really, really cool people doing really cool research. And we put it out there. It's free. It's easy for you guys to use because we put it in infographic form. And we do videos and we post news articles where we're talking about our research. We just want you guys to get the information, share it with your clients. Oh my God, that food smells good and I'm starving. Okay. Okay, that's it. Nice job. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, for being here today. Our next big event at the Hillside Conference Center will be the Caar Realtor Political Action Committee Fall Festival on Thursday, October 17th from 4 to 6:30. So please get signed up. Attendees can look forward to the fall-themed contest, giveaways, food and beverage for the whole family. You can learn more about this visiting our PAC table in the pre-function area. Now I'm going to read the winner for the HIP. And do you want me to read this whole thing? Just the, okay. The number 626410. All right. Is the person not here? 626-410. Yay! Okay. At this time, we will move into our Hillsdale Conference Center grand opening reception, where you will enjoy complimentary light hors d'oeuvres, if you hear me, and beverages located in the classroom and in front of the boardroom. Each attendee should have one drink ticket when you signed in. We encourage you to network with each other, visit with sponsors, and introduce yourselves to the builders who are here to share their upcoming development and programs. While you tour your new space, staff will be stationed around the facility to answer questions. Thank you and enjoy. This meeting is adjourned.